The time is just gone 10 minutes past 8 p.m. as we continue with the show Wednesday nights with myself, Inayet Wadee, and wonderful being in your company once again. And early on, we had an inspiring discussion with Dr. Tariq Tahboob out of the United Kingdom and discussing Palestine. And these are people that inspire us. Now, one such inspiration has been the late marhum Moosa, Mosey, Moolla, rahimahumullah, who sadly had passed away, but he was a giant among giants. And sadly, we learned of his passing away. And tonight, we have assembled a wonderful panel just to talk about his life and also at the same time to understand as to who Moosa, Mosey, Moolla really was. Now, before we get to the panel, we were sent a video recording where the late Moosa, Mosey, Moolla, rahimahullah, was at a gathering, and I think it was a reunion, if I am not mistaken. We're going to just play out this short clip before we get to the panel.
Told me, Mosey, just remember, teaching is a thankless job. I don't think I want to say that again. There was a pupil from England, no, I mean from India, was teaching in the Senator school, who was a pupil of mine in Senator school. And he went to India and he became part of the acting world. He came in front of my door, knocked on the door, "Where in Roshnee?" And he says, and he looks at me, I open the door. He says, "This toppy doesn't know me." I said, "You must be out of your bloody mind. You are Krishna Jina from Leslie. Sir, you still remember me?" I said, "Of course, you were a good boy. That's why I remember you." I remember all good children. Thanks to all the people who organized this function. A gracious thanks to Mr. Ahmed. A gracious thanks to Mr. Hashim. A gracious thanks to my ex-pupil. Very good pupil. Very good pupil in my school. I think he will be a better principal, inshallah. Inshallah. Our job is to look after children, to care for them, to worry about them. And Shahid knows very well. I said, "Shahid, I'm going to give you a focus because I love you." And I still love you. God bless you.
Yes, that was an event that had taken place. It was a reunion event where the late Mosey Moolla obviously was talking. And we are now going across now to be joined by our panelists just to reflect and to pay tribute to the life of this giant amongst giants in the educational sector. And we're going to go now to be joined by, we've got Professor Yousuf Dadoo, Hassan, Saley, we've got Percy, Mestry, Hazara, Bhayat will be joining us as well. And we have got Abdullah, Sujee. And as our panelists come on screen right now, and remember, you can view this, you can go onto the Salaamedia YouTube channel to pay tribute to the late Moosa, Mosey, Moolla. And see right up on the screen, we've got Hassan Saley, who is the principal of the Roshnee Secondary School. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Inayet. And also greetings to our listeners and viewers and to the other panel members.
Yes, and Percy Mestry, retired businessman, welcome to the show. I think your mic is muted. If you could unmute, please. Okay.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Much clearer, definitely.
Thank you.
Yes, and we've got...
My greetings to my fellow colleagues there.
Yes, Professor Yousuf Dadoo, assalamu alaikum to you as well, retired academic.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening to all the panelists and viewers.
And the deputy principal at the Al-Falaah College, Abdullah Sujee, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from a warm Durban. And yes, excited to be on the program to talk about a great man. Jazakallah khair.
Well, certainly a great man. And Prof, I think I want to start off with you. And obviously we are paying tribute, and we saw the short clip of the late Moosa, Mosey, Moolla. And one could actually just see the passion of this man. And I know that there are many, many people that have gone under his mentorship, under his tutorship, particularly looking at Standerton. Now, this was at a time where there were very few Indian schools. And we know that many of the elderly folk, I remember my late dad, for instance, having stayed in Standerton and schooled in Standerton as well. And he clearly, the late Mosey Moolla, has clearly made a mark. And obviously, when we pay tribute to him tonight, there are many, many memories. There are many memories through your mind that are flashing through right now as we pay tribute to him.
Absolutely true. Firstly, I think as a teacher, he had meticulous preparation and presentation of his lessons. Then, of course, together with that, there was a blend of firmness while he taught. That firmness was combined with a very warm interpersonal relationship with all the pupils. We could, of course, go into lots of details about these things, but I'm just mentioning some of these issues very, very briefly. He is a person who tied his success to the accomplishments of his protégés. And often I heard him recounting a list of successful achievers in different fields over the 4 decades that he taught. Of course, together with that, what made him a very special person is that he had a very affable personality. Outside school, he would often join pupils as an equal during sporting events. But came school time, he expected to see our work up to mark. I mean, there was no compromise on that. Besides that, there were lots of life's lessons that he taught me. Well, of course, during the course of our discussion, I'll be very happy to share some of them with you, but I wouldn't like to bore listeners and viewers at this stage, outlining all of them at this point. But let's see how our discussion unfolds.
Yes, Jazakallah for that, Professor Yousuf Dadoo. And we're going to go across to Brother Hassan Saley, the principal of the Roshnee School, and just your memories of the late Moosa Mosey Moolla.
Very, very fond memories, Inayet, especially as an educator, and those listeners that are out there that are educators will identify more with us. I started my career under him in 1989. A man who was very, very passionate about education. I think we identified, or rather for me it was quite easy to identify with him because both of us loved our sports and we both played sports, cricket and soccer. But the man himself, the humility, the leadership qualities, the counseling that he gave educators and learners was phenomenal. He would always be ready to listen to us, hear our complaints. And in those years, during the apartheid time on the House of Delegates, principals were more authoritarian. But he never showed that authority openly. He would always be welcoming to us, listening to our problems, listening to the children's problems. And this made a mark of a good leader. There are a few instances, that we can talk about as Prof has alluded to. But, where there's things that I now as a principal, sometimes the day that he passed away, not knowing that he's passed on, I mentioned an incident about him in the staff briefing. And this is the type of memories we have, the advices that he used to give us that we still carry out with us today. And later on, if we do get the opportunity, I'd like to mention some of them. which really has an impact on me as a principal. Thank you, brother.
Well, certainly, we certainly will. We certainly will. And we're going across to Percy, Mestry, and just as a way of introduction as well, just looking at your memories, Percy, of the late Moosa Moolla.
Thank you very much, Inayet. Much appreciated. My warm greetings to all you gentlemen. And Inayet, you and your team, thank you very much for organizing this tribute and homage to my dear friend, Mosey Moolla. It was with great sadness that we learnt of the passing on of Mr. Moolla. Our condolences to the Moolla family and his extended family. I had the privilege and honor of knowing Mr. Mosey Moolla from his time that he was in Standerton. I have family in Standerton, and whenever I visited Standerton, I used to bump into Mr. Moolla at my family's residence. And as a result, we established a firm friendship. There was many incidents and episodes that we had faced together, and it was my pleasure to be in the presence of Mosey Moolla. And there's many incidents that I can talk about, but I'll leave that for later. Thank you, Inayet.
Yes, I'm certain that all of you have got a lot to share as far as your experiences and your memories of the late Mosey Moolla goes. And obviously, still a very young, but obviously, and always an inspiration, Abdullah, Sujee. And I know, Abdullah, you obviously have been inspired, and being the deputy principal, having been an educator for a very long time, having been in the education space, and looking up to a person like the late Mosey Moolla. What does it mean to you?
Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to all panelists as well as guests who are listening in. Alhamdulillah, Mr. Moolla was my teacher of geography when I was in school. He was then my first principal in 1994 when I began teaching. And in my book, Teach and Lead, I've actually mentioned something about my very first time as a teacher in the school and how he navigated my career path, all because of one meeting. I remember him fondly, all because education for him was a vocation. Leading a school was a challenge which he wanted you to share in. And because of his generosity of spirit, he wanted you to become the person you must be best at, whether it is at soccer or cricket or whatever it was. He gave of his life unselfishly. Therefore, tonight I am in awe of his presence, because he's left a legacy that people like us who have yet to, I would say, rise to the challenge, have these stalwarts to imitate, to look up to, and to understand that they had greater challenges and they maneuvered and they woke up every day with an inspiration. It is the likes of Mr. Moolla that gives us the courage to continue teaching. Now that I'm settled in Durban here, the deputy principal of Falaah, but my passage of school, I would say the rites of passage actually started at Roshnee Secondary School under the tutelage of Mr. Moolla. So I'm intrigued to listen to what panelists have to say, and I want to conclude here before we hand over, is that when Mr. Moolla would come into a classroom, when he would actually take over the lesson because he found it very interesting, you were never inundated with his message. You were never overwhelmed with his presence. You actually felt like a person, at a water's edge, wanting to drink more. And when he had to correct you, it was always in the privacy of his office. And he did so with such a calmness. And, Mr. Saley would know, and we'll share the incident if time permits about my register. And that was his remarkable trait. Your mistakes were never something that you shout about, but he always nurtured you. And that is why today, Mosey Moolla, Mr. Moolla remains that teacher, that principal, that man who will forever be the emblem of what I would say a great educator.
Yes, shukran for that, Abdullah. And getting back to Professor Yousuf Dadoo. Now, Prof, we've heard, just by way of the introduction and just by way of the memories, that there is just so much we can talk about this man, about this giant who has made a huge mark and he has left a legacy, as Abdullah Sujee has pointed out. And also looking at someone like Mosey Moolla in not only in the education space, because from what I'm hearing, and I'm sure there are thousands upon thousands of students and learners who have gone through and have got to know who Mosey Moolla was and the impact and the inspiration that he had made, brought into their lives. But just looking at him as a person, because from what I'm hearing, communities, we're talking about people like Percy, Mestry, who speaks about his good friend. And I'm sure it's not only in the education space, just looking at the community that he served. And besides just being an educator or besides just being a principal at school. And I just want to just touch a bit on his involvement as far as the community is concerned and what did the community think of him?
Well, somehow his academic career coincided with my first year at school in Standerton. And the amazing thing is that he enjoyed a wonderful rapport with, of course, his colleagues, teachers, pupils, and everybody else in the administration of the school, but also with the larger community. He served the community admirably. I know for quite a while he was almost a housemaster of the hostel that was run in Standerton. He lived in the proximity of the hostel in Standerton. Unfortunately, all those landmarks have been destroyed, and there's no way in which we can show these types of things to the rest of the world. Only those who still have memories of these things in their minds will be in a position to speak about these things. Other than that, unfortunately, there is nothing, physically to show the type of environment in which Mosey Moolla worked, circulated, and of course, contributed to the larger community, whether it was at the level of social issues, religious issues, all other types of matters. Mosey Moolla was looked upon as a sort of a beacon of light by the community at that particular time. If I may just say something about myself here, and his contribution to me, he inspired me to follow my career. I am what I am because of his inspiration. I don't want to go into too many details about that because that would require much more time. Another thing that he helped me with was that he trained me to do public speaking, to represent my school at speech contests. In those days, the Aligarh Old Boys Association, those of us who are our age group will recall such events. They used to be convened once a year during the 1960s, organized by the Aligarh Old Boys Association. And it was Mr. Moolla who trained me to do public speaking. And which gave me the opportunity to represent my school on a couple of occasions.
Yes, in fact, I've just got, in fact, something that's come up, and it's an email that was come through from a Qasim Ibrahim Aka Balod. And he's basically sent this through to us where, and I just want to read it out briefly, where he says, I am very pleased to contribute a few words to honor my friendship with my very dear friend, Moosa. Moosa and I first came into contact while we were in primary school. We were students at the Standerton Indian and Colored School. We were also neighbors. In 1955, we left Standerton to complete our matric studies at the Johannesburg Indian High School. After completing the matric exams, Moosa pursued studies to become a teacher. While we worked and studied in different places, we nevertheless maintained regular contact and did some interesting things. For example, we went to a UNESCO camp in Lesotho to help build a 2-room school for primary school students. We hitchhiked from Joburg to Cape Town at a time when hitchhiking by Indians was rare. We climbed and slept in a cave on the top of Table Mountain. After descending via Platteklip Gorge, attended a dance party that evening. We hitchhiked to Oudtshoorn to explore the Kango Caves. We slept in a road builder's shack, and we were caught in the when we were caught in the downpour of rain. But we did do the tour of the caves the next morning. In more recent years, Moosa and Zohra, as well as my wife Fatima and our children, did a round trip by car from Roshnee to Durban, to Port Elizabeth to Cape Town, and then by train, Rovers Rail to Johannesburg. Obviously, I'm not going to mention the naughty things we did together, like stealing peaches and cactus pears in a Standerton. Now, we thank Qasim Ibrahim for that, Akabalod, for sharing these memories. And just to get back to you, Mr. Hassan Saley, looking at, you mentioned incidents, you mentioned memories that impacted on your life personally.
Gee, Inayet and listeners, you know, when you're sitting now as a principal, you basically, every day you think about what your principal would have done, the principal that you worked under. And I was fortunate to have Mr. Moolla as my principal. Just a few things that always come in and which I mentioned to the staff. You know, one of them is when I started teaching,
It's only on 2.
he told me that, Saleh, look at the child's forehead and what is written there. And I looked at him stunned. He said, it's written there, teach me and discipline me. And I still use that with my staff today. And I always tell them to think about this child. This child is crying out to us for help, and this is what is written. And that is one of the things that he would always tell me, you know, about the children there. And the second thing is, especially in today's time, it has more of an impact. It says, do not take it for granted that the child knows everything. And he used an example. He said, you know, sometimes you're reading out from a book and you're talking about the beach and the sand under your feet and thinking that the children know about this. But how many children have gone to the beach, have gone to the seaside? And this I noticed after that, when I did go down to the sea, and I noticed some of the children, and a friend of mine told me that it's the first time these kids have come to the beach. And this memory sticks with me on what he told me in 1990. This happened around 1998 when I saw this. And I said, wow, this man knew exactly what he's talking about. Passionate about teaching, passionate about sports, you know, and always motivating. You know, Inayet, he passed on, but prior to him passing on, he would come and visit us at school. And every educator, when he sees them, even if he did not know that educator, he would always comment and tell them, you are doing a sterling job under the circumstances that you are in. And keep on carrying on and educate our children. And these are the memories that we have with him. And Allah grant him the highest stages of Jannah.
I mean,
You know, for imparting this to us, because it's also something which is, as we know, Sawab-e Jariyah, when you talk about the man, of what you've learned from him and the experience that we had with him.
well, certainly, Mr. Hassan Saley, and also Percy, looking at obviously many of our panelists are looking at it from an educational perspective because this is how he impacted. But having somebody like Mosey Moolla as a friend, and obviously that is enjoying a very different relationship to one that he would have as an educator or a principal with learners, with educators, and the like as well. And I'm just looking at it from a friendship perspective because the email that I read out from Kesim Ibrahim, looked at it from a completely different angle. He spoke about naughty things. So it does say a lot more about the character of Mr. Mosey Moolla. And he was not only the serious educator that, or the passion for education, there was a lot more to him as a friend.
Well, Inayet, it just shows Mr. Moolla, Mosey was human like all of us. And we really admired him. And I must mention that when I got news that Mr. Moolla was being transferred to the Roshnee Secondary School, I was tremendously excited by this event because now was a friend of mine's hailing from Standerton, coming into our township and coming to serve our community. And I knew this is going to strengthen our friendship. But I must also explain that, during the segregated period of our education, when democracy was coming in mid-90s, Mr. Moolla handled this transformation from the segregation side of it to the democratic side of it with great skill and professionalism. And I must mention, without fear of contradiction, this entire exercise went off smoothly and seamlessly. Now, many people were not probably aware. All of us, when it came to democracy, we had our little fears in our families, in our community, and in our society. But Mr. Moolla, being a strong person that he was, made this transition very, very comfortable for all of us. And I appreciate and I salute him.
Yes, thank you for that, Percy. Is there anything else you want to
add? Yes, I want to also add that I have been involved and am involved in community work for the better part of my adult life. And I had the pleasure on calling on Mosey on many, many issues pertaining to our society. He always listened to both sides of a story, and his wise counseling and advice stood out as a beacon of hope to our society. Also, Inayet, I have great respect for the teaching fraternity because these men and women are the people that shape our society, shape our community. Mosey was a stalwart, not only in the education, but in communal affairs as well. And he lived up to what he said.
Yes, thank you for that, Percy. And we're going to go now to Abdullah. And Abdullah, obviously a huge loss to the people of Roshnee. And knowing Roshnee, this town obviously has produced many people that have made their mark. And our late colleague at Salaamedia, Ibrahim Gangat, was one of them. And I'm sure the other has been Mosey Moolla as well. And just looking at the mark and what he meant for the people of Roshnee, and not only for the people of Roshnee, wherever he was and the lives that he had touched.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Inayet. It's a loaded question. In my book that I've written, Teach and Lead, I've actually written about Ibrahim Gangat Marhum and Marhum Mosey Moolla as icons who taught me the meaning of life. In the book, I speak about Mosey Moolla in my first day of teaching, and I'm just amazed to learn that what he told Brother Hassan Saleh, he actually told me on my first day of teaching, and I actually write it down here. He said to me, on the forehead of each child is written, please discipline me. After asking me the very same question he asked Mr. Saleh. So what I would begin saying here is that Roshnee, in its way, has and is still producing leaders. Society needs them. And the likes of Marhum Mosey Moolla, excuse my emotion here, actually brought out the reality that ordinary people can rise to extraordinary achievements. He came as a stranger to the community of Roshnee, but became a stalwart. He became a member of the community, and he brought a certain burst of energy that is alive today and can be felt reverberating in the studio and on the electrical waves this evening. What he taught us as people, as teachers, that you got to take huge tasks upon your shoulders, shoulder it, and do something with it. And he always taught us never to do things for show. So Roshnee, in a sense, was the playground for us to learn how to lead, for us to learn how to do things under people, under people's authority who had done it before. Now you will find in Mr. Moolla that he wasn't that man that you would find giving religious sermons. He wasn't the man that you would find giving very long talks. What you would find, and as you saw in the video clips, his entire life was a practical example of courtesy, perseverance, honesty, and integrity. When I became the principal of Roshnee Islamic School, I invited him on a Friday morning, as was the norm, to get the teachers to listen to people of excellence. And they came to the school to share their best practice with the teachers, whether it was a doctor, a lawyer, or whoever it might be. And Mr. Moolla came that morning, and the staff meeting started at 7:25. He was there at 7:20, I recall. And in our staff meeting, which we have specialized time for until 8 o'clock, Inayet, when he spoke to the teachers about being the classical teacher, where you extract from humanity that which is beneath their hearts and in the depth of their souls, seasoned teachers looked at him with awe, and they loved him instantly because he resembled that gold teacher. He resembled the gold standard. And as I say here, and like I say, it's emotional because he then took me by the hand after the meeting, and I recall our little conversation, to paraphrase it. And he called me son. He said, carry on with this principal's position. It's difficult, but you will persevere. Your challenges are different from mine, but remember, you have a job. Don't give up. In conclusion, I remember when I first became the principal at age 37 at Johannesburg Muslim School, Mr. Moolla drove down. That time he was in good health. He drove up from Roshnee to Johannesburg Muslim School. He sat in my office, and it was such a daunting task because I was a principal for the first time in my life at the age of 37. And here this man came and he spent the entire morning with me. And we had a lunch at one of the restaurants. And you know what? I offered to pay, and he did not pull back. He says, no, you are my son, and I'm paying for you because you've become a principal today. And he gave me such advice that today it can be written with the thread of gold. That's why people like him will forever be etched in our memories. And I can understand when Professor Dadoo talks the way he talks about how he has become a orator because of the teaching of Mr. Moolla. I could only envy those moments. So Mr. Moolla has been a great mentor and certainly a loss to society. But it is us here, the panel here this evening, we can carry the likes of his legacy forward and the likes of those that he inspired. Thank you so much, Jazakallah, for this emotional but very important tribute to a man whose memory will live on. Jazakallah.
Well, deserving of that tribute in every way from what I'm listening to our panelists. Yes, we need to apologize. I think there was just a bit of a break in communication there, break in signal. But Prof. Yousuf Dadoo, and
Yes.
when I look at the words that Abdullah Sujee has used, he spoke about someone who is practical, someone who is sincere. He speaks about integrity. But I want to talk a bit about dedication, and I'm sure you've seen it firsthand as well, Prof. Looking at 40 years, 40 years is a lifetime. And it takes a lot out of a person in terms of dedication. And perhaps you just want to touch a bit on, what you've seen him as being dedicated, not only for the cause of teaching, but as you mentioned, deeply rooted in community affairs, and also what that dedication actually resulted in as far as the community was concerned, and the value that a person like Mosey Moolla had brought to the community.
Inayet, I feel that some of these experiences that I have just jotted down, I'll be happy if I'm just allowed to share them very briefly with you. Some of them, of course,
Sure.
Some of them, of course, are a sequel to what has already been discussed. As we are well aware, Mr. Moolla was a person who was passionate about teaching, and of course he put a very high premium on the dignity of teachers. And I still remember when we were at high school. This was way back in the mid 1960s. Turning to Muslims, he would say that, well, what do you pray every day in your salah, in your daily prayer? Allahumma ghfirli wa li walidayya wa li ustadi. And well, of course, the dua continues. Just to translate, oh Allah, forgive me, forgive my parents, forgive my teachers. And then he would turn attention to the fact that teachers here is used generically. There is no mention of the fact that the teacher has to be a male or a female, a young person or an old person, a Muslim or a non-Muslim, anything. Or regardless of the subject or the field that the teacher was teaching. In other words, the important thing is any teacher was worth more than his or her weight in gold. And that is one point that he emphasized very, very strongly. Very interesting at that particular time. There's still, we've got to accept it in certain ways without trying to push certain unpleasant issues under the carpet. There can sometimes be a little bit of racism that doesn't, that's rather close to the surface with some of our people. And again, turning to Muslims, I still recall him saying that if you keep speaking about African people as a Karya and this and that, black people, how will you face the Holy Prophet's companion Bilal radiallahu anhu on the Day of Judgment? I mean, some of those types of examples that he gave were too brilliant, and they have actually impacted upon me up till this very day. How will I, if I carry racism within me, how will I be able to face the very eminent companions of the Holy Prophet on the Day of Judgment? Then, of course, you know, he was just amazing. One day, he brought out a plain white sheet of paper, and he had a reasonable sized black dot on it. And he asked us all right, what do you see? And well, of course, we said, you know, we see this black dot. I mean, that's the normal response. He said, you see, that is the human problem and the human failing. There's so much more white on this paper. Nobody's speaking about that white. But that black spot, that black dot on that paper, people are quick to capitalize upon that and speak about that. That is why, getting back to evaluating people, we seldom pay enough attention to the larger white, the larger good that people possess, but rather concentrate on that limited evil and wrong and negative traits that we have. I can still recall, this was way back in Standard 8 that he did this. This was around in 1969. I still remember also, he said that we cannot have a clear understanding of our successes and our failings without some honest person who could act as a mirror for us to reflect upon our strengths and our weaknesses. And then, true to his love for English literature, although of course he was an A-class geography teacher, he was also an excellent English language teacher. And the amount of Julius Caesar that he taught me during the course of his geography lesson, I will not forget. In relation to this, he said, for the eye sees not, self, but by reflection. In other words, we are incapable of seeing our own shortcomings, our own strengths, and our own weaknesses. We need to have others to reflect it back to us. These are lessons of life that go well beyond the confines of a classroom or even the confines of a school. And these are the things that we need to bear in mind. I would just like to conclude here with a very touching thing. You know, sometimes we also did some interesting things while we were at school. When we were in matric, some of us, towards the end of the third term, were not too keen to sing the stem on the last day. And the school principal immediately realized that there was something amiss. But he knew that Mr. Moolla could really swish that cane very effectively if he wanted to. And for that reason, to cut the long story short, he said, well, Mr. Moolla, come, you sort all these boys out. And we were, each of us were made to lie on our bellies and given 6 of the best, each one of us. This was way back in 1971. But now, in 1992, while I was already a senior lecturer at UNISA, he invited me to address the matriculants, to give them a farewell message in 1992, which I did. I came to Roshnee, but before I could deliver my speech, he called me aside in the privacy of his home, and he said, you know what, you must forgive me. I said, what is it that you are asking me for forgiveness for, sir? He said, well, you know, way back then when you were in matric, I lashed you. And I shouldn't have done that. But I was just following my principal's instructions. I said, you know what? I've forgotten about these things, man. And you know, the good that you have done far outweighs these types of even trespasses, if you could call them that. So forget about it. But to think about it, 20 years after the event had transpired, he recalled and sought my forgiveness.
Yes, well, that speaks a lot. That speaks so much. It speaks volumes about the man, Prof.
Exactly.
Definitely. Yes. And Percy, just as a friend, and I don't know whether you can recall any light moments with him as a friend.
Well, you know, Mr. Mosey Moolla always operated below the radar. And there were a lot of instances where confidentiality had to be respected. So there is a lot I can talk about, but I don't think this is the occasion to talk about it. But at this juncture, Inayet, I want to use this opportunity to compliment the Moolla family for making Mosey's twilight years of his life a pleasant one. And family, you will be blessed for your deeds for Mosey. Normally, you know, as society, we tend to forget our elders. But his family, and really, I take my hat off and I compliment you. You look after him right to the end, and you made his twilight years a pleasant one. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Percy. And I see Mr. Hassan Saley has joined us as well. And we've got about 3 or 4 minutes, and I just want to go around very quickly just to obviously wind down the program and get some final thoughts. So starting with you, Mr. Hassan Saley.
Gee, brother Inayet, sorry, we've got a power outage here, and that is why I had to get onto my phone. But I'd just like to quickly read something that one of the other educators have written down, and they've passed this note on to me. It's a lady by the name of Mrs. D. Naidu. And this is what she writes. Mr. Moolla was a gentleman and a principal of stature. I started my teaching at Roshnee Secondary in 1995 under the leadership of Mr. Moolla. At that time, I just relocated to Roshnee from KZN and had taken up a post at Roshnee Secondary. He welcomed me with such warmth and greatness. I remember Mr. Moolla's words to me, Madam Naidu, please do not move into a flat. That's not for you. You have to buy a house in Roshnee. I adhered to his words with no regrets. Subsequently, on his visits to school, he always advised me to stay, and amidst the challenges we faced in education, he was vibrant, jovial, and active member of Roshnee Secondary School. He will always be remembered. On the lighter note, Abdullah Sujee will remember that we as teachers had an award called the Blue Max Award. It would be something funny that an educator would do. And he would always, as a principal, he would also participate in it. And he won it on 2 or 3 occasions while we were at school. These were the fond memories that we have of him.
Yes, Alhamdulillah. Abdullah, final thoughts about a minute. I know we are obviously pressed for time.
Yes, very quickly. Just one hilarious moment. The Roshnee Islamic School opened when I was still teaching at the secondary school, and the uniforms were the same. So the pupil, 2 boys came from the Roshnee Islamic School down to our school in their kurtas. And they stood at Mr. Moolla's office, and I was next to him, and I think Mr. Saley was also there. And Mr. Moolla stood firmly, and he had his finger in their faces, and he hollered at them, "What are you boys doing here? You know, you're not in uniform." And I think Professor Dadoo, who could actually understand this, these boys were beside themselves, and they said, "Sir," he said, "don't sir me around here." They said, "Sorry, sir, we are from the Roshnee Islamic School, you're not from the Roshnee Secondary School." He burst out laughing. He burst out laughing and he said, "Sorry, my sons, what is it I can help you with?" So he could navigate between anger and love instantaneously, a habit and a quality very few human beings have. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah for that. Prof, just final thoughts from you?
There's a great sense of loss, although we realize that it was coming. I mean, no person is going to live forever. But here we have lost not just a teacher, but a mentor, a person who was larger than life, a person who impacted upon thousands of people. If you could just think of the fond memories that many of them have, I think all that ought to stand in good stead for him in the life to come.
Inshallah, I mean, well, Percy, just last words from you.
Inayet, in conclusion, always remember, we lose a loved one, we gain an angel. Much love and appreciation to a dear friend whose dedications to the principles of humanity I hope to emulate. Thank you, Inayet.
Thank you for that, Percy, and also to all the panelists, to Mr. Hassan, Saley, Principal of Roshnee Secondary School, Percy Mestry, and Professor Yousuf Dadoo, and also to Abdullah, Sujee. To all of you, we thank you and we do appreciate you taking time out for this important tribute to the late Moosa, Mosey, Moolla. It certainly has been an eye-opener for me personally, obviously having not known the man as well as all of you have. But for me, clearly, it actually stands out. And these are people that make their mark. These are people that leave a legacy. And he certainly has left a legacy. Our thoughts go with his family and his loved ones as well. We're making dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him forgiveness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill his qabr with nur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him the highest stages in Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him. And this is exactly what Professor Yousuf Dadoo has said, that it's how you live your life. And at the end of the day, the reward obviously is a lot more greater in the year after. And that is our dua once again. To all of you, I do appreciate your time. And we thank you for taking time out and spending time with us in the company of Salaamedia on the tribute to the late Moosa, Mosey, Moolla.
Jazakallah.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of another broadcast, Wednesday night with myself, Inayet Wadee. Once again, it's been an absolute pleasure being in your company. From myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.